Oh, you went live. Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Mohammed.
I'm Paul.
And we're doing a live taping to discuss different kinds of roasts. And I have been working with Decent for almost 2 years. I have to admit, I have a certain role and I don't know much about the coffee knowledge. And we thought now that we're doing the live series that I would just get Paul on record and I ask the questions that I genuinely don't know the answers for. And we just, let's take it from here.
Yeah, sure.
Let me just ask you, start with a very easy question. What is the different kinds of roasts?
So people may be familiar with the bags on the when you buy a retail bag of beans, and you may have seen wording like filter roast or espresso roast or maybe drip. And these kind of give you clues on what style of coffee that this bean has been roasted to or produced at. And in generally speaking, an espresso roast would be medium, maybe a medium dark, but more on the darker side. And filter and drip would generally be more on the lighter side.
Very good. And what kind of drinks are appropriate for which kinds of roasts?
So let's just, sorry, I was behind you. I'm not going to be as fast as you are. So I had to switch to camera one. Yeah.
It's okay.
So when there's a pause, wait till the camera actually switches, and you'll see on the front camera. And when you see camera one on, then you can ask your question.
Cool. So let me ask you this: what kind of drinks is appropriate for which kinds of roasts?
I think this would generally be more about, again, your preferences in terms of drinks you like. But as a general rule of thumb, I would say the lighter roast is more for the black style or drinking straight, and the more sort of medium dark roast is more suited to milk. And this is kind of just relating to clashings of flavors. So if you have light roast, the acidity will clash with the milk, and it doesn't really blend flavors that work together. So in general, that's where you would want to be.
And is light roast always more expensive?
I would say so, yes. And this is mainly due to the selection process. Lighter roasts generally are more expensive because of the more laborious process in the selection. And darker roasts, they generally tend to be of lesser quality because they don't really want to waste that potential in a darker roast.
And does that mean that light roast is always better?
That's a tricky one. And I would say it's kind of, in general, yes, but not an absolute. In general, lighter roasts, you could say coffee is like a fruit, and fruit varies, and so does light roast. So it really does depend on where they've sourced and also who is roasting the coffee for you.
And on the same topic, what happens if I find cheap light roast beans? Do I buy? Is it safe? Is it good? Or something is wrong?
In general, cheap light roasted beans would not be as high a quality as the more expensive ones, and that is reflected in the price. But I wouldn't say that it was potentially a bad sign that the bean was going to taste bad. It could be perhaps that the farm or the origin that they've got from is not as well known, and it's like wine. You get cheap wine that is good, but you also get expensive wine that is marginally better. So coffee is very similar in that aspect.
And how can I tell if my beans are bad, whether it's light roast or dark roast? Like I bought beans maybe as a gift, someone gave them to me.
Yeah.
What do I do just for a layman to know what beans are they working with?
Now, a lot of retail bags will have a lot of their roast date on them. But some don't, and it's kind of left to your senses, or maybe you get friendly with the person who sold it to you to get more information. But if you've got none of those clues or none of those avenues to seek more information, you would just use your senses. And the best thing that you could do is open it when it's fresh, give it a good smell, and try to remember the intensity and what you liked about it. You don't have to pick out certain flavors, just remember the intensity. And every time you go back to it, give it another smell. And within about 2 weeks, you'll start smelling a change in difference. And the first thing you'll see is the intensity will definitely die down. And then from the intensity dying down, you'll start to smell sort of nutty flavors. And if you're really good at scent smelling, you'll start to smell some of the acidic things if it's a light roasted coffee.
Before I joined Decent on my very basic machine at home, the biggest problem I've always had was the acidity. I really didn't like the acidic taste of the coffee that I was pulling. First of all, why does this happen, and what can I do to avoid that?
I would say that acidity or higher acidity in coffees is generally related to lighter roasts, and that would be your first point to be mindful of, is just to, you know, if you don't like that acidity, don't go for the super light one, at least go for a medium and see if you like it, and if you don't like medium, then go a little bit darker. We'll show some beans a bit later in some B-roll, and you can kind of have a comparison of what is a lighter roast bean and what is a medium dark bean. And for anything in terms of how you're judging on the roast level, having that comparison is key. So, yeah.
Am I going off just color in terms of light and dark? Am I just looking at literally this bean is light color and this bean is dark color?
Yes and no. In generally, the color will be darker. And let's take medium and darker roasts. Darker roasts, you will see a sheen as if oil is sort of coming out of it. And as the lighter you go, the tone of the brown will obviously decrease in intensity. And the lighter the bean is, the more denser it is. So you can actually try and break the bean as well, because color can be a little bit deceiving. So personally, I would, you know, put it through a grinder and have a look at the grounds, and sometimes may even put some water on it to see how it is. But in generally, it's a little bit of experience and just having a look at the characteristics of the bean.
I grew up drinking Turkish coffee, and I now don't have access to it, but I really like thick espresso.
Yeah.
What do I do to achieve that, and what kind of beans should I work with to achieve the thicker espresso?
Okay, that's a really good question, and I think we're touching upon two things here. One would be the roast level of the bean, and due to the roasting process, you know, lighter roast you will generally roast a little bit shorter as compared to darker roasts. But what does that do in terms of how the structure of the bean reacts when you grind it? And the darker you go, basically the more fines, or what we call fines, very, very small coffee particles will be produced. And that is the main component in what makes really thick espresso, or as in a Turkish coffee. So my advice would be choose a darker roast for sure, and stay away from the lighter roast if you like really thick body.
Beginner, should I try to go for the most expensive coffee beans I could find? Is it gonna make my life easier as a beginner?
It's a very easy route to go down. You know, you see prices of beans and you think, oh, I'm just gonna get the best one. But I would say that if you're really starting your espresso journey or coffee journey, you really want to hold back on buying the best of the best right now. I recommend, you know, you try to learn what is more appropriate for the bean that you're buying or for the style you're buying. And this really relates to more the lighter roast, where if you don't have a grinder that is capable of, you know, grinding to the quality that is needed, you'll find it very, very difficult. So if you're just starting off, I would say medium, light would be as light as you go, and go from there. Otherwise, you know, you may fall out of love with the process of making coffee.
Right. And how long can I let the bean sit in a bag after I open it before I just can't use it anymore?
This is very much coffee dependent. And what you generally see is darker beans will age a lot quicker. And this goes back to the roasting process again, where obviously it's roasted a lot longer. So what happens is that the degassing process for darker roasted beans happens much more rapidly, as compared to light roast, where the coffee is a little bit, you know, more dense and has more moisture content. So it will be releasing those gases a little bit slower. So how does that relate to aging and when to know your bean is stale? You just have that in your mind. You know, lighter roast, I could probably leave it to, you know, 9 days before I start, maybe all the way up to a month and a half, even 2 months, depending on how you're storing it. But darker beans, you have less flexibility, and you could probably start drinking at 5-6 days, and maybe look to finish around about the 3.5 week mark.
People, I've never done it myself, but people freeze their beans.
Yeah.
What does that do?
So freezing the beans slows the aging process, and if you have access to a vac machine, you can even extend that to 3-4 months and beyond. And what that does is it enables you to have a little bit of cost saving because you can buy more in bulk. But also you're not losing that potential in spending all that money buying that in bulk. So it just gives you almost like a bookshelf of coffee beans if you really wanted to. You can buy multiple beans, but being rest assured that it would keep fresh and still taste good at the same time.
It seems to me that a lot of the coffee authorities, the figures that have authority on coffee, all prefer light roast. As a beginner, should I try to keep up with that? Sometimes I enjoy a dark roast, but I'm like, they like some, I feel like I'm missing out. Can you explain why they even like it this much?
Yeah, and this is, again, it's personal preference and their exposure to coffee. I suspect a lot of these influencers and people who have built a name for themselves in coffee have tasted a lot of coffee, and it's kind of like, sometimes I describe coffee like cheese. First time you drink coffee or first time you eat cheese, you probably don't like it as much as you do now. And this is, I would say, to a certain extent, an acquired taste. And the more you drink coffee, or the more you're exposed to higher quality coffee, the more knowledge you will have and the more appreciation you have with those higher quality beans. But we all start out the same place, and in general, we all start in the darker regions, and maybe even instant coffee in a lot of cases. And you just get that progression into higher and higher quality the more you go.
On the same topic, a lot of influencers also prefer filter coffee. I don't actually know what filter coffee is, really.
Yeah.
And why do they prefer it as well? So can you just tell me first what a filter coffee is?
Sure.
And why do fancy people like it?
Okay. So filter coffee, if you've been into relatively good cafe, they may have a few options on there for you. Maybe there's hand drip, maybe there's espresso, and some places, especially in the US, will have brew batch coffee or filter coffee. And these are the machines that are in the back, and they may be 3, maybe 4 feet in height, and they have a massive little sort of, looks like a massive colander essentially, and they put the filter paper in and all the coffee. They put it in, and it just basically slow drips through the filter, and that's why they call it filter coffee.
Is hand drip different from what you just said?
Hand drip is generally more of a smaller quantity of coffee, whereas filter coffee is more sort of larger quantity. So that's why you have the term batch brew, because it's like, this is the batch of the filter coffee we have today. But if you're talking about hand pour overs, instead of a mechanized system on the top dosing water, you will have a kettle or a pouring kettle, and you're brewing the coffee in that way.
All right. We also have a kind of, like, I would switch topics a little bit, but I wanted to try to judge a bean by just looking at it. Is that like an advanced thing to do for a beginner?
I wouldn't say it's an advanced thing, and simply put, we've all been there where we've looked at a bean and we're like, is this medium? The roaster says medium, but it kind of looks a bit lighter than I'm used to. And everyone has their own interpretations of what the roast is, and even from roasteries to roasteries, they will have a different opinion on what roast degree they're doing. But what I would say is it's never too early to start comparisons, and comparisons is the way forward. So the way I do it is I will always have some leftover beans. I will never run out of beans, and I'm comparing my last bean that I was using to the one that I'm going to do. And this gives you more of a realistic gauge on the grind setting that you're most likely going to use, and so on and so forth. So it's all about creating good habits and gaining that data so you learn along the way, as opposed to just best guess. And that's the way I've learned, and historically that's the way a lot of people have learned as well.
And how can I tell by the words on the packaging how fresh or what kind of beans I'm working with and the freshness of it, aside from maybe the expiry date? That's what I'd go off of.
Yeah. This would tie into how they would describe the coffee. So if it's an espresso style, like we mentioned before, or a filter or drip style, and this gives you clues into how they've roasted or how deep or dark they've roasted the coffee. Espresso, again, will be generally a little bit darker. Filter is slightly in the middle, and hand pour-overs or drip coffee would be on the lighter end of the scale.
Let me ask a question. Are there certain words that would be trigger words for you as they describe the coffee on the bag?
Yes.
Can we ask that question, Mohammed?
So are there certain words that you can see on the bag and immediately trigger something in your head?
Definitely, and I would say any adjective that is not describing flavor. So you may see things on coffee bags like bold, strong. These descriptions of the coffee generally indicate a more darker roast. If you see words like fruity or maybe caramel to a certain extent, those would generally lead to a lighter roasting style.
So I'm gonna pop in again. What I was hoping is you might talk about how on the label, any words that are related to roasting, essentially caramelization, tend to mean medium or darker.
Yes.
So anything from toffee, caramel, chocolate, that likely means at least a medium.
Yeah.
In those cases, whereas an absence of anything from toffee, caramel, chocolate means light.
Mm-hmm.
So you take a bang on that.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just going to go back to Mohammed and say, what about words like chocolate and caramel? Are those meaningful?
I see sometimes words on the packaging and it's like chocolate, caramel, nutty, fruity. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, these definitely give clues into the roasting style, and I would say, caramel and chocolate would generally lead to a medium darker roast. When you see stuff like fruits in terms of like poached pear or really sort of berry notes, then you're really looking at lighter roast coffees. And if it is on the opposite end of the scale to light and dark, you get like chocolate, maybe spice. And heavier notes that are indicating of the roast level. And you can kind of see this in terms of how they describe sugars as well. So it may be brown sugar, demerara sugar, and then it might be licorice. And the brown sugar would be maybe on the lighter roast, demerara in the middle, and then licorice being the dark side. So you can see a correlation between how they're describing it for sure.
Just on the sound, I'm mostly getting Paul clearly.
Okay.
The sound upstairs isn't really leaking through.
Okay. I want to get to a place where I can taste the coffee and tell what is the roast.
Yeah.
Because now I'm at a stage where I know what is bad coffee and what is not bad coffee. And I can probably tell if it's burnt.
Yeah.
Because that falls under bad coffee.
Mm-hmm.
But I've worked here for 2 years. I want to taste the coffee and be like, oh, this is a medium light. What can I do?
Again, that would tie into the description of the coffee in terms of flavor notes. And way I would start you out would be the easier flavors like chocolate. Everyone loves, majority of people love chocolate. And when you kind of say, do you like dark chocolate or do you like milk chocolate, most people would have a good idea in their mind what it will be. And in general, most coffees will have a little bit of chocolate in them unless you're going super, super light or medium light. And as if you're starting on your tasting journey, we introduced before to have more of the medium style so you have an easier time getting a good shot. You will find those flavors in there. And just by, taking a note on what does that chocolate taste like, you will build that database. And to accelerate the process is if you, taste coffee together with someone. And that will enable you to sort of think about, okay, that person's tasting this. Oh, can I taste this one? Or maybe I've tasted it as something else. But even if you've tasted it as something else, I wouldn't say that you're wrong. It's just that perhaps your adjectives in describing it may not be aligned with maybe industry professionals or what the coffee shop is saying. So don't be afraid to taste and don't be afraid to say it out. You're never wrong. It's all a learning process and we've all been there. So
great. I think I ran out of questions about coffee knowledge at this point. John, do we have any YouTube questions?
Let me actually pull up YouTube to see.
Oh, live chat. So while you do that, for people who are tuning in, this is the live taping. You can tell that it's not scripted. We just go, and then after the taping is done, we unlist the video and we edit it and we release it later. So people who are tuning in who think we're not prepared, we're not. We actually would like you to go on the journey with us and watch us do the taping. And then we take it down after. But you will see the final product later on after we do all the edits. If you are on live chat and you have questions for me or Paul, please, yeah, I can hear myself now.
You can hear yourself, but you do not have any questions.
Okay, that's fine. All right, thanks, Paul, for the knowledge. Thank you for tuning in with us, and we'll see you in the next one. Sweet. Do you know how to look at